The Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program represents a rewarding academic professional development opportunity for faculty at Montgomery College. The fellowships are a product of a unique collaboration between Montgomery College and the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access. It's the first of its kind between the Smithsonian Institution and a community college.
Kateema Lee completed her undergraduate and graduate work at the University of Maryland at College Park. She teaches the full spectrum of English classes, including an introduction to women's studies at the Germantown campus. She is currently serving as the English 101 college-wide distance learning coordinator. She is also a Cave Canem graduate fellow. Her writing has been published in print and online literary journals.
I want to start with a poem from Walt Whitman, and I think it kind of speaks to my objective with my project. It's from Song of Myself. Trippers and askers surround me, people I meet, the effect upon me of my early life, or the word in the city I live in, or the nation, the latest dates, discoveries, inventions, societies, authors old and new, my dinner, dress, associates, looks, compliments, dues, the real or fancied indifference of some man or woman I love, the sickness of one of my folks or of myself, or ill-doing or loss, or lack of money or depression, or exaltation, battles, the horror of fratricidal war, the fever of doubt, the fitful events. These come to me days and nights and go from me again, but they are not me myself. Apart from the pulling and hauling, stand what I am, stand amused, complacent, compassioning, idle, unitary, looks down, is erect, or bend an arm on an impalpable certain rest, looking with side-curved head, curious with what will come next. Both in and out of the game, and watching and wondering at it. Backward, I see my own days, where I sweated through fog with linguists and contenders. I have no mockings or arguments. I witness and wait. In my EN 101 class, it's the first of two composition courses that we offer here at Montgomery College. In this course, we have students start out writing more personal experiences, and then they later write more complex essays where they incorporate the words of others from assigned readings. So what I had my students was think about their lives as a journey. And one of the exhibits that we visited, Finding Oneself and Others, Portraitures Staging Now, is the impetus for this idea. So Christopher Colon's ambition, journey, and destination helped to shape the world we know today. I asked my students to think of your life as an expedition. Where did your journey start? What have you learned along the way? What have you shared with others? What mistakes have you made along the way? And what is your intended destination? And then just something that I told them to think about is during our journey, we exchange ideas, we leave things behind, and we evolve into a whole person shaped by all of our life experiences. So my implementation had 5 steps. The first step was introducing the theme. Then we had an exploratory phase where we talked about personal origin. Then there was the museum visit, portrait selection, and then crafting their essay. Now, some of our essay objectives were to incorporate narrative, description, some expository writing, and some critical thinking. And ultimately, I wanted my students to be able to use this essay as possibly they could use excerpts from it for college transfer essays, because it's a self-portrait. It's pretty much a narrative essay of self. So I was hoping that it would be useful for college and also something self-reflective. So step 1 was introducing the Columbian Exchange, and we started with a short video that gave background about the Columbian Exchange. And we talked a little bit about how something as small as, what we might consider small, mosquitoes or tomatoes, greatly shaped and changed this world that we live in. The next step was personal origin. So I had the students write about their history, their own personal family history, and answer the questions, who are you? How is your interaction with others and landscapes around you shaped who you are? And I asked them to bring in artifacts that are connected to their origin. I brought in a few of mine as examples. And if you look at the portraits tell you a lot about the family. It tells you a lot about the era that the family's living in. And so that's why I wanted them to bring in some type of artifacts. The next step was the visit to the museum. And so I had them look at 3 exhibits: American Origins, 20th Century Americans, and then finally, Portraiture Now, Staging Self. We took the metro together, and it was fun. We had a lot of fun on the metro. And I was taking pictures, and some people were hiding, and some people were happy to take photos like these guys here. But once we got to the museum, I gave them a worksheet, and the worksheet had objectives for them to complete while they're in the museum. They had to find portraits in each exhibit and write about them. And I had detailed instructions on things that I wanted them to focus on. So these are just a few pictures of them exploring the museum and writing about portraits that they found interesting. We drew a lot of attention at the museum. I think a lot of people thought I was a docent at one point. And my students would just sit on the floor and just write about, things. And it's like they took over the museum. This is just one of my favorite pictures of a student looking at Toni Morrison. She was really involved in describing what she was seeing there. Then the next step, I had them choose a portrait from the Staging Now exhibit. And what they had to do was describe the portrait using strong adjectives and sensory details. And I wanted them to find a portrait that reminded them of their own lives or reminded them of their family. So their instruction was to read the description of the image and then summarize the description in their own words. And this is just an example of what one exhibit description looks like. And then students would have to put it in their own words. So I have a few clips here, and the slides are a little out of order. I was going to show this last, but I can show it now. These are just some responses of the museum experience. One of my students, Bora, and I'm not seeing him right now. There he is. He's writing for the Globe about the showcase, but he was one of my students last semester. So can you play the clips?
I loved it. It was absolutely amazing. This isn't my first time here, but there are a lot of exhibits that I didn't get to visit the last time I was here, and I was truly in awe of everything, and I want to come back.
Good. It's not often you go to special places like the museum and you spend like a couple hours just looking around, observing, and taking notes. I wish I could do this more often. I just loved it.
So while at the museum, this is one of the portraits that a student selected. Some questions I had them consider is, why did you select the portrait? How does the portrait remind you of you or your family and or your personal experiences? And then step 5, which is the final step, is the pre-writing, drafting, and revising stage. This is where the students actually take all of the materials that they collected at the museum and they craft it into an essay that, like I said, is part self-portrait, part reflection, and part maybe college essay material for transferring to college, to another institution. So here are some excerpts from that. Madison says, on the class trip to the Smithsonian Museum, I examined the portrait titled The Neighborhood Tour by Vasquez. I believe that this painting symbolizes the growth in a community where there may be some struggles. With the acceptance and help of others who may be different from us, we can find strength in a community through though there may be many different backgrounds and ideologies. Emily says to me, her portrait, and she's talking about duplicity, 50%, resembles that no matter who we grow up to be, it will never change who we truly are and where we come from. And Jacqueline wrote, visiting the Smithsonian with my class and seeing specific portraits brought me back to my childhood and the struggle my parents had to go through in order to give all their children a better chance at living a good life and having the opportunity to chase their dreams. So with each assignment, my students refined their voices. They were more confident expressing their views in class. They shared their narrative origins, which was great. And visiting the National Portrait Gallery and incorporating the exhibits in the work increased class cohesion, like many others mentioned. It also increased interest in learning and writing and increased critical thinking. And at the end of the semester, several students commented that they enjoyed our class trip to the museum, had fun, and could not wait to return. And just for me, my personal conclusion about the whole thing, we know that Montgomery College has a strategic plan for 2020, and two of the goals are educational excellence and ensuring that our graduates look back at their time at Montgomery College as being the most enriching moments of their lives. The Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program cultivates relationships between faculty and Smithsonian learning communities, and it offers faculty and students the opportunity to experience the life-enriching exhibits and programs that the museum has to offer. Collaboration not only presents memorable experiences for students, but also provides stimulating and renewing experiences for faculty. And for me, one of the highlights was when Harry Rubenstein presented his perspective exhibit about democracy. I thought that was really great. So that's it.